Hey, so we love kind of doing things a little bit different every so often, and today is one of those days. I know that in the past we have had different situations with stools on the stage, and so today I have made sure that each of these stools are in good form, and so it's going to be a good day. But we are in a moment going to bring some folks up, and we're going to have some fun. We've been talking the last several weeks about love, marriage, and relationship. Carlos is over here. He's just laughing at me. Like, he loves when Sam shares the stool fall video, and he's laughing at me. I'm offended. Sam says I would never. He's a liar. Listen. We've been talking about love, marriage, relationships. I know that not everybody in here is married. That's okay. That's okay. There are biblical lessons that can be learned through this concept of love and marriage that go far beyond the marriage relationship. So we encourage you to take hold of some of these principles. But if you are married, you might think, but my marriage is great. I really don't need this stuff. It can always be better, right? It can always be better. There's always ways we can get better. And most of the time, that requires us kind of looking internally at ourselves. So today, the message, even though it's going to be a very short message before I bring them up, it's entitled Love, Relationships, Marriage, Harder Than Weight Loss. Harder than weight loss. Now, like when my wife first saw the slide, she's like, harder than weight loss? Are you saying our marriage is hard? I'm like, I already made the slide, so what do you say to that, right? No, our marriage is not hard. Our marriage is not hard. But marriage in general, it takes work. It takes work, and that by itself means it can be hard, right? Because if it was easy, you wouldn't see so many ending in divorce or in other problems, right? And so we're looking at it in terms of harder than weight loss. I have a business associate who, when we go into meetings, I've heard him tell the story twice. Now, he's been married. He's an older gentleman. He's been married for 50 years almost. 50 years. And if you knew this guy, he's actually attended here once before. If you knew this guy, he is about as friendly and lovable of a guy as you'd ever meet. Like even more so than pastor, right? That's saying something, right? And he told the story once. He's like, I've been married for almost 50 years, 49 years. And he said, I used to brag about how good my marriage was. He said, I had the best marriage. And then one day, about 25 years in, he's like, I was bragging about my marriage, and it occurred to me, based on my wife's response, I had a great marriage, but she didn't have such a great marriage. She had a rough marriage, right? It was great for him, rough for her, because everything was going great. He got what he wanted and stuff, and she was very accepting of everything and easy to work with. But she was the one sacrificing. And so marriage takes two, and that means it takes work. But harder than weight loss. How can marriage be harder than weight loss? Listen, I know that many of us, we're kind of on the tail end of our follow through with the New Year's resolutions. And we're going to, this is the point where we start trailing off. If you go to the gym, all of the people at the gym will talk about, Ray says this, JV said this. Yeah, you wait for the New Year's resolutions folks to leave after the end of January, beginning of February, and then, the machines will be open again because nobody will be here because, they fell. We're at the tail end of our follow through of the weight loss. When you think of weight loss, though, it can be tough because you have to go regularly. You have to keep going daily. And if you're like me, you can go for years without working out. And then one day you're sitting there on the couch with the ice cream on your belly, and you're enjoying your slouching, and you stand up and you look in the mirror and you're like, wait a second, how did that happen? Right? That was not funny. You say, how did that happen, right? And it's because it takes work on a daily basis. And if you let yourself go physically, if you go for a long time without giving any attention to your body, well, then there's a good likelihood that you're going to get to that point where you stand up and you look in the mirror and say, how did that happen, right? Conversely, if you're working out, it's a daily focus, a daily commitment, and it's hard. It takes work. It takes commitment, dedication, sacrifice. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's painful. And yet we still do it because we know that the result after that pain actually is a positive result. So we're willing to subject ourselves to pain because we know that it's going to be a good feeling when we actually, the muscles start repairing. It can be a good thing, but it takes work. The pastor had mentioned the running and the marathon. Listen, I ran, and then I didn't want to run, right? It takes work. And I haven't run very much since I ran at the end of November. And now when I'm getting back in the gym and I'm trying to run, it's not like it was because it takes work. But sometimes we get the mentality of, well, I said I love you on our wedding day. Nothing's changed. I'll let you know if it does. That's not how it works. Okay, so this morning we're going to look at 2 quick scriptures, go through 3 quick points, and then I'm going to bring up some folks who can kind of talk through maybe how marriage has worked well for them, maybe obstacles they've faced, and things that hopefully will be beneficial for everybody in the room. So the first scripture I want to look at is Genesis chapter 2, verse 23 and 24. It's going to be on the screen. I'm going to read through it somewhat quick. It's one that we've gone over the last couple weeks. It says, the man said, this is with Adam and Eve. This is the story of their creation and God bringing a soulmate. So the man said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his mother and father and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. By the way, when I first read that, the thing that goes through my mind first is, wait a second, Adam, Eve, they left their mother and their father, but wait, she just came out of his rib and was formed out of the sand. Who's her mother and father that she left to leave and cleave? And who's his mother and father that he left to... Listen, it's principle, okay? It's principle. I don't know who his mother was. We know who his creator was. Okay, now let's also look at Ephesians chapter 5, verse 28 through 33. This is recounting that story from Adam and Eve. It says, in this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, unless, of course, you get to that point down the road where you stand up and you're like, how did this happen? They feed and care for their body, sometimes too much, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So, real quick, 3 very quick points. Marriage, according to the scripture, it requires the golden rule. Requires the golden rule. It says very clearly, and you can see it up there, in this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. It's a reciprocal message, meaning the wives, you love your husband as though you love yourself. We love each other like we love ourselves. It's the golden rule. The quicker we learn the golden rule in life, the better our marriages will be. And the quicker we learn the golden rule in life, the better all our relationships will be. It's true. It's not just a hunch, it's a biblical, spiritual principle. If you treat others as you want to be treated, you will be blessed. That's just the way it works. And in your marriage, if you follow the golden rule according to Ephesians, you will be blessed. Your marriage will be healthy, right? Number 2, it says marriage requires unity. Marriage requires unity. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Listen, when I think of two becoming one flesh, yes, there's, of course, the physical intimacy component there. But think of it in terms of the working out. When I hurt my hand, my whole body feels it, right? I'm distracted. When I stub my toe, there is nothing that will get my mind off it until that pain is gone. I'm thinking about that stubbed toe. If you have become united with your spouse, it's a similar experience where You should be knowing when one hurts, knowing when something is off, knowing that you can give joy and be happy when they're happy. You care more about them than yourself because that's what doing unto others means. And you're united. That doesn't mean you live separate lives and when you get home at night, then you kind of catch up on the day and that's the united part. No, it means that you're going through life together. You are one being, one body, one blessed union by God. So unity, according to Ephesians here, is important. And then marriage requires selflessness. So we've been going through this marriage class. It's one of the Sunday school classes, which, by the way, Norm over here, yesterday at men's breakfast, he said, listen, men, why don't you guys send all your wives to the marriage class? They can kind of get this right. Men, you come to the men's ministry class, the men's class. And Eddie said, amen. She's not here to hear that, but I won't tell her. So we've been going through this marriage class, and you know what's very consistent? Every time we're in different classes, no matter what the lesson is, one thing that comes up often, communication is an issue, something that is one of the biggest issues within marriages. Not that the people in the class are having trouble with marriage, but as we're working through the curriculum that we're given, almost always communication comes up, and selflessness. Selflessness. You think of whatever the last fight you had was. Just, you don't have to say it out loud, but whatever the last fight you had. And you know what? You don't have to even think in terms of your spouse. The last fight you had with anybody, I would almost guarantee if both of you were selfless, that fight wouldn't happen. Just whatever the fight is, if you didn't place yourself above whoever else you were talking to, the likelihood is that fight doesn't happen. Selflessness is such a key. And when we see this in Ephesians 5:32, this is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. How did Christ love the church? That's how we're supposed to love our spouse. How did Christ love the church? He gave everything, sacrificial. He put the church ahead of himself. He suffered for us, for the church. He didn't deserve it. He wasn't owed the pain he got, but he loves the church enough, he gives himself freely. That's how we're supposed to love our spouse. We give ourselves completely, totally, selflessly, like Christ does the church. And so those are the three quick points that I want to point out. We seek Christ in our marriage. We seek Christ in our lives. And that's how we have a beautiful union in our marriages, right? You're like, okay, yeah, that was a very quick drive-by sermon. I know. I'm not looking to kind of go through too deep on this because I believe there's benefit in bringing folks up and letting you hear some of things that they say. They don't know the questions. They haven't heard the questions. And I've asked some folks, just because I think they'll be honest, Pastor, if you can come up. Pastor's been married for a very long time, and we'll hear a little bit more about that. Elka, I would have had you come up too to keep him honest, but I didn't know if you would really want to. And I did ask, where's Chuck Carter? Chuck Carter, I know, there he is. Chuck Carter, listen, Chuck's one of our board members. I've heard Chuck share a little bit about his marriage over the past, and it's something that is an encouragement. So I want to have Chuck come up. And I much like I mentioned, Elka, about keeping Pastor honest, Nancy, if you'll come up to keep me honest. I could say nothing but positive things about myself, and I'm guessing that she would correct it. I had a couple of others. Some are ill, and so they weren't able to come. And so it is convenient, but I mention that because the women out here are probably going to say, wait a second, there's only one spouse, one wife up there, and that might be a little bit unfair. And so you are responsible to take care of all of the women's perspectives, okay? So first of all, Pastor, you know what? Let's grab you, Mike. You can grab that mic there. And then I'm going to grab two more. So this is 1 and 2. Check. There we go. All right. So, Pastor, why don't you tell everybody, first of all, how long have you and Elka been married? We'll see if you get it right. Now, we're all looking at Elka to see her response. So
July 19th of this year will be 45 years.
45 years. And are you happy?
Yes.
Good. Chuck, how long have you guys been married?
October 4th will be 46 years.
Woo! 46 years. And are you happy?
Very happy. Nobody else could put up with me.
And Nancy, how long have you been married?
Maybe you should answer.
This is a test.
June 3rd will be 20 years.
20 years. So obviously
Wait, you didn't ask me if I was happy.
That's because I don't want to risk that story where I say I've got a great marriage and you say not so much. Are you happy?
I am.
Good. Have we ever fought?
Never.
Good. Oh. Hey, I promise you, she doesn't know the questions either. So she has no idea. She just knows that she has to go home with me. Sorry, she gets to go home with me. So, we talked briefly, I don't know if it was Wednesday or if it was yesterday morning in men's breakfast, but one of the things that we talked about, if I recall, when we're in community with one another, we're all supposed to be seeking God. Can you agree with that? We're seeking God and we're trying to become more Christ-like. So when it comes to Christian community, we come together and we don't forsake the fellowship of the brethren. That's what we're told in, I believe, Galatians. We don't forsake the fellowship of the brethren. Why? Why would that matter for us to be in community? Because as we're in community, we're drawn to the Christ in each other. So as my wife draws closer to Christ and I draw closer to Christ, in theory and in practice, when we draw closer to one another, it's because we're drawing closer to the Christ in one another. And as we're on our life journey, the closer we get to Christ, the better our marriages are. Pastor, can you agree with that or speak to that at all? I know that wasn't a very open-ended.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think there's another dynamic. We're drawn to the Christ that is in one another. But I think Christian marriage is a place that makes us or gives us opportunity to become more like Christ than any other relationship.
Explain that.
Because contrary to you and Nancy never having a fight, Elka and I have fights. And if we're going to make our marriage work, we have to make that thing. We have to work out what that conflict and that difficulty is. And none of us by ourselves, never thought of it this way before, none of us by ourselves will be totally like Jesus. But when we work together as marriage partners, and this is true for church relationship too, when we work together in different focuses and ideas and all of those things, we are more like Jesus.
So I can think of times in our marriage where I might look in the mirror and I think, man, I'm having a good hair day. and it's in those times where my partner provides the blind spot protection to say, actually, not so much. Uh-huh. So to your point, when we're in relationship with a spouse, we're more open to the correction, and we recognize that we complement
one another. Or we should be more open to the correction.
True story. We're open to correction, and it helps us to, iron sharpens iron. Sometimes that conflict can be a positive thing. So has your marriage always been great? Like, have you had rocky times in your marriage?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you maybe give a little bit more color on that? I mean, you're our pastor. Pastors don't have problems.
I think early on, I think early on in our marriage, I was pretty myopic, focused on me, and really didn't focus on the demands on my wife. I think with kids and that, when you have 3 small kids at home, some of you have experienced that and have more than 3 small kids at home. The Burns out here, how many kids are there at the house now? 6 kids. Double our pain. If that happens and you're just, focused on you and what you have to do and all of that, it can create quite a bit of conflict and problems.
So one more question, and then I'm going to move on to Chuck here. What in these fights that you've had, the different rocky times, and rocky has a different meaning for different people. Mm-hmm. Some people, a rocky marriage might mean, you are throwing high heels at each other and slamming doors. It could mean, you're talking divorce. It could mean fighting, or it could just mean you're not speaking to each other.
We never talked divorce. We talked murder, but we never talked divorce.
For those of you who don't know, that's a good AG answer, because you can still be an AG pastor if you murder, but you can't be if you divorce.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the longest period of time that you think you've gone where you haven't spoken to each other?
Oh, wow.
She's looking at you.
Yeah, what? Less than 24 hours? Oh, I thought there was a period where it was more than that, but, forgetting the things that are behind me, pressing on towards.
Okay.
I would say maybe a day or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chuck, now obviously we've spoken at different times. Every Thursday night, Chuck's up here for prayer, and we invite you guys to come. Thursday nights, he's up here for prayer. Chuck, your marriage it's 46 years. Man, will be. That's a long time. Can you relate to the comment, I had a great marriage, and then she didn't have such a great marriage?
Sure, at first we had a great marriage. It was pretty equal when the kids were small, but when they became teenagers, that's when things blew up. And it's 80-20, 80% on me. Because when you get things out of order, if God's first, your wife's second, kids are third, all that's in a row. But I went the other way. It was God first, and then I took God for granted, and I put the 2 teenage boys, one was saved, the 2 teenage, I put them above Linda. And she sensed all this, and she saw what was going on. And she's praying for me the whole time, and I'm oblivious to the whole thing. I took God for granted. I took her for granted. I thought, this thing's will work out. I hate to say it, but it's true. Because my parents had a terrible marriage, and I always thought, man, she'll never leave me. This is great. It's always going to be fine. Oh, well, it didn't. So it all blew up one day. June 1996, we had a big blow up. I said, well, just move out. Well, go ahead. So we happened to have an old rent house that was empty. So I moved in that.
So wait, June of 96.
Right.
You moved into another house.
Moved out.
Maybe I should ask another question first. What's the longest period you went without talking?
Okay. Probably a year or so.
A year?
Possibly.
I'm no marriage expert, but I don't think that makes for a healthy
No, it does not.
relationship.
It does not.
So you moved out in June of 96, okay? Tell us what happened.
We just had a big argument. I said, we'll get back together someday. Well, that someday didn't get there. And Linda was always going, we need to go to counseling. Naturally, being a man, I'm like, we didn't want counseling. We're fine. Yeah. She said, this ain't right. We're like brother or sister. What's going on here? I'm like, it's fine.
This is when you're not living with her?
Before.
Before.
There was a couple of years of trouble because I was dismissing everything she was saying and going, it'll work out. We'll be fine. But it wasn't fine. I was in denial the whole time.
How long have you been married at the time when you guys got separated?
That would have been 22 years. You think at 22 years, everything's fine. Oh, it's not if you don't work at it. It can blow up in your face, especially when one of you is off the track, when one of you has your order wrong. So down the road, we finally went to counseling once, and this made it even worse. This counselor is a Christian counselor. She's going, well, you're like poison to her. She don't even need to be around you. I'm going, wait a minute. Ain't you supposed to be helping her? Helping us? I said, well, this didn't work out. But we would get together and talk every once in a while. And then things started getting better slowly over time. We started getting more on the same page. And it's like one day I looked in the mirror and said, it's you. It's you. It's God saying, you're away from me, strike one. And that's breaking everything else down. Strike two, some of the kids were getting in trouble. The whole family dynamic is falling apart. And I said, it's like I'm going, yeah, it's me, Lord. Let me get right back to you. I said, Lord, get me right with you. Get Linda back right with you. And then maybe we can put this back together. I got to say one thing. You're going to think this is crazy. But there was a movie called Independence Day a long time ago. And there's a scene where the main characters had split up with his wife, and his dad's going, why are you still wearing your ring? You've been divorced 3 years. Move on. Later on in the movie, before it ends, they have to run into this room because there's another couple getting married. And he had just blown up with his ex-wife again. So he sits down, and she's going to sit down next to him, and she looks at that hand, and the ring is still there. And she's like, oh, I can't believe he's still wearing the ring. And then you could see it starting to come back together. So that was a point for me. I thought, all right, I'm not giving up. I've been a jerk for all these years. I'm going to get on the ball here. And if God will help me, maybe we can get this marriage back together. I said, I know when people separate 6 months, 8 months, it's over, it's gone. You go look for greener pastures. And I thought, no, there's still love there. I need to straighten up. I need to get right with God. So over time, we started dating.
So how long were you guys separated?
Well, let me finish this up. So, real quick. So in 2000, it's almost 4 years, we took a leap of faith and took a vacation together, and we had a great time. And then we're saying, well, maybe we'll get back together. So the next year, we go on another vacation, and we're in Myrtle Beach, and it's 9/11. We were fighting, and that just ruined everything. And I went home and said, all right, I give up. It ain't never going to happen, but God was telling me, no. Stay faithful to me, and I'll put this all back together. And on top of this, the church we were going to was fixed to close the doors. The high school was shut down. The elementary school was shut down. People were leaving the church. I thought, well, everything's just falling apart. But God can put it all back together. So eventually, we went to another counselor, and this one was going, okay, maybe you two can work it out. We did some things, and we started dating more, and it all started to come back together. So I moved back home March 2002, which was 59 months. So 3 more months would have been 6 years. So 69 months, 69 months. So from March 2002 until now have probably been the best years of our marriage because you can't give up. If you'll submit to God and surrender and say, look, whatever the problem is, help me, Lord, to do my part. And I know you'll work through me and through the other people. It's never over until your last breath.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So, if you could tell a younger Chuck some advice, what would you say?
When your wife's talking, most of the time when she's talking, she don't want your opinion. she just wants to air out her problem, and you agree. And be nicer, because that's the one you love. Be nice. When you first get married, you want to be around that person all the time. You want to hold their hand and all this stuff all the time. And later on with kids and stuff, some of that gets away. But when you see that person and they smile at you and you go, okay, it's all right with the world can be blowing up, but if that person you love is still with you and they smile at you when you smile at them, life is still great. Life is still good. And another thing, you can do easy things for your wife. You don't have to buy her flowers and stuff all the time. Make sure the car is gassed up. That's not a hard thing to do. Make sure when the car needs tires, you take care of that vehicle. That's not her job. And help around the house. You know, don't say, oh, I did my work. I'm home now, so I'm done. Help around the house.
He has a working blog for his younger self. it's daily posts. So, Nancy, we've been married 20 years. What's the longest we've gone without talking?
3 days?
You were on a trip.
No. Okay, that's excluded. I can't remember the fights. We have fights all the time. Not really big fights necessarily, but like I wouldn't be surprised if we went back and looked and it was like even 4 or 5 days that we went, even though we're talking.
We do the necessary, the kids have to go here, the necessary talking that we have to talk to each other, but we are avoiding the problem.
I'm curious for my kids out there, have you ever noticed that? You're supposed to say no. Okay, Eli's saying no, and so he's going to get extra lunch today.
Yeah, but He's older.
Well, so it occurred to us though, what was it, 6 months ago? We were fighting in the truck, and I don't even know what we were fighting about. It probably was something dumb, and we kind of finished whatever the fight was.
It started in the house, and we went out to the car.
And the kids were in the back seat on the drive, and like after it was kind of quiet, they're like, Eli said something like, "Can you guys never do that again?" And it was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I've just never seen you fight before, and it really scares me." And of course, that means something when your kid says that to you. How important is it, Pastor, to not fight in front of the kids?
I have an opinion here, and that is that if they do see us fight, it's extremely important that they see us resolve the fight and work it out. I've counseled couples before that were in shock within the first 6 months to a year, and she never saw her parents fight, but he saw them fight, and to him it was a natural thing. She was like, "Our marriage is falling apart, we're fighting." And she didn't understand that what these parents did is they hid behind closed doors, that there was conflict. And if you hide that, there can be some ramifications to that. But what's most important is when we do have conflict, that our kids see us work that out.
So when it comes to, the three things we talked about from Ephesians, the golden rule, unity, and selflessness, what can you speak to, and this goes for anybody who wants to speak up, about how to overcome conflict with your spouse given those principles from Ephesians? What are some maybe tips or tricks that you can say, when we get into conflict, one of the things I do or one of the things we do is X, and that helps us?
Who do you want to go?
I think you just need, especially as you get older, you should be more mature, listen to both sides. A lot of times my wife would say something, I try to butt in, she goes, "No, I'm not through talking. Just hold on." And she would say, and this is true for either way, she would say, just want you to hear me out. I don't need your solutions. Let's just talk this out calmly and coolly, and then you can help resolve the situation. But one of you is trying to jump the gun and going, "I don't even want to hear about this." You're in it together. You need to be on the same page because you're a team till the end. And the golden rule is the golden rule. Treat your wife or your husband like yourself. Think of their needs. Like if I go buy her a gift or something, what would she really like? I get excited about
Power screwdriver.
No, not what I want.
A vacuum.
A clean kitchen. Oh, sorry, woman's perspective.
So suggestions from you two.
I think it's all about communication. Like you said, there are times that Josh and we say this in our Sunday school, we will have our conversations through text because, like you said, if you're in person, you're always thinking how you're going to respond. So he's talking, but you're not really listening to him because you're trying to think about your response on the first thing that he said instead of listening to his whole point. So there are times that we will have our arguments through text conversation so that you can read it and reread it and see what it is he's really saying. And I'm a horrible arguer. I lose every fight. So it helps for me to process and think about it and get it all written out.
So one of the things that we've kind of done early on in our marriage was kind of set up rules of engagement. You watch the boxing match or the UFC fight, and at the beginning, the ref says, "Okay, these are the parameters. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Do you guys all agree?" So we kind of set those up at the very beginning. That, okay, we're not going to slam doors, although you did kind of slam the door last night. I would say I wasn't going to say something, but I have every intention of saying something. So we don't slam doors. We don't act out of anger. If it can't be done calmly, cool, collected, then you wait until it can. So we kind of have rules of engagement that say if we're yelling or if we're heated, then we're not going to have the conversation then. Let's wait till we can let it die down so that you don't say something you're going to regret. Because the last thing you want is to, say a bunch of things that, later on you're like, I really wish I'd never let that out of my mouth. And so, to her point, one of the things that has worked well for us, because I grew up in a family that we interrupt each other, and it's just our normal culture is we talk over one another. That doesn't work when you're trying to listen to your spouse. So one of the things that we decided is, okay, well, we can actually do pretty good if we're texting what we're thinking or what we're expressing. This is a problem. Because you can think everything that you want to say, type it out, change it, reread it to yourself, and make sure that what you're saying is what you meant to say.
Make sure you reread it.
Always reread it before you send it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll type it all up, and just typing it up actually is a form of catharsis.
Yes,
and then you can backspace and never send it, right? So we'll send it, and then whoever sent it, the other person can read it, reread it, and interpret it the way that maybe it was hoped to be interpreted versus in the heat of the moment. And I think that there's times that another thing that we'll do in the rules of engagement, always assume the best. Like, I love you, you love me. That's out of the way. So now that we know that's who we are, we love one another, let's then apply that to everything that takes place in our relationship. So, if I say something that hurts you or offends you, make sure you put on it the beginning point that says, oh, but he probably doesn't mean it that way. Why? Because he loves me, or vice versa. So, Pastor, how about yourself?
I think your thoughts on text are really good too, but when we talk in person, we can not only hear the words, but see the emotion behind the words. It's kind of an irony, I think, for me personally, that one of the biggest parts of my job is to communicate. And I communicate poorly at home. I just fail there. And it's because I'm not a real good listener, and I need to listen better. I'm praying for something here this morning, and I was listening to a podcast just recently. I thought, wow, is that true? This guy wrote this book called The Ultimate Learner. He took a 4-year course through MIT, did it in 12 months, and aced the finals. But one of the things he talked about was this, is that we are really good at acquiring knowledge. We are really poor at transferring that knowledge to application. Some of you are hearing some things in this room right now that's like, oh yeah, that's great. But if you don't transfer that knowledge to application in your relationship, it's worthless. And I'm going to say that because of me. I've done premarital coaching for decades. And, there's some times where, wow, I need to do that at home. I need to transfer that. And I'm trying to do that. Trying to be better at that. This lady that's put up with me for 45 years. No.
He does to me all the time. He tells me how perfect you are.
No, not painting you perfect. It's just that, one of the damaging things that I did in the first part of our marriage, I work for God. So she oughta just sacrifice, because I work for God. Man, is that damaging. Again, none of us are like Christ separate. It's us working together that we become like Jesus.
So, and we're nearing the end here because we're out of time, but yes. I'm curious. There's a lot of thoughts around love and relationships that Hollywood paints for us. TV tells us this is what love looks like. Is from the emotion side of things, do you always feel the love? Was it something where it's like, this is my soulmate, and so as a result of me knowing this is my soulmate, it's just like there's literally butterflies around you all the time and birds chirping that take the blanket and fly it around the house, and the little squirrels like wash the floor, and like Disney tells us? I mean, what does love mean to you? How does love work?
Well, I see the butterflies, so. No, I think it is constantly working. It is selflessness, like we were talking about. It is when I'm having a bad day, or when I just want to go to my room and not talk to the kids and not talk to Josh. After a long day.
No food for you.
You don't get to eat lunch. I think it's him realizing that, him picking up those hints without me necessarily having to say it, and him taking care of things. It is the small things, like cleaning the kitchen when she's not going to want to clean the kitchen. I think I've pumped my gas maybe 2 or 3 times. Now it's more Isaac and Eli's job than it is Josh's. But I mean, it's the little things like that it's not the flowers every day. It's not all the butterflies and roses, but it is the small things that you think about that just help them out on a daily basis.
Chuck?
I think this goes back years ago, but it's the same today. That person just doesn't just love you. That should be your best friend, and they have your back. A long time ago, I had a job, and the boss I'll make it real quick, was cussing us out every day. I said, "That's not the way you treat everybody." I told Lynn, I said, "Look, I'm going to go in tomorrow," and all the guys agreed, which they really did. And they said, "We're going to confront the boss, say, look, treat us like men, we'll do a good job, but you can't be cussing us out and treating us like dirt. What do you expect?" I said, "It might cost me my job." And she said, "Well, if you feel like that, I'm with you." That's a good thing for a wife to say, or the other way with the husband. So it all worked out. And as a young Christian, I should have handled it better, because he started his usual cussing. I said, "Look, man, I got up and nobody else got up." I went, "Oh, this is great." I said, "Treat us like men, we'll do a good job." And I was just so upset I left. He said, "Well, you going to come back to work tomorrow?" Yes, I did. And after that, he started being more like a normal guy, and everything went fine. But she had my back.
She supported you,
yeah. Yeah, 100%. I would support her at her job. When Linda wanted to retire, I was going, "What? You want to retire? You're making good money and all this." But she'd come home and she was just beat every day. I said, "It ain't worth it." I said, "I'm not no spring chicken. I can't find another wife, so you need to retire." "I'll keep working till the house paid off. You retire right now." "No. I can't lose you over that job. No, retire."
Pastor, what does love look like, and soulmate and all that stuff?
It's whatever it takes to take and stay together, to work together. It is at times flowers and candy and the restaurant and all of that. It's not either or. It's both and. And in our culture, we tend to think it's one or the other, and it's not that way. I mean, if you're going to have, and I believe it's more rewarding and more fulfilling when we do go through those periods where we got to give 150%, and we get on the other side of that. It's like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah.
So love, in my mind, it's not a feeling, it's a decision. With the decision, feelings do come, but it doesn't start with the feeling. It doesn't start with the roses and the butterflies and all of that stuff. It starts with a decision. And it's a decision every day. I'm going to love her with everything in me, and she's going to love me with everything in her. And we decide that together all the time. And sometimes we may not feel like it. Sometimes we might miss that feeling even. But it's a decision every day. And it's like when you think of worship, there are times that we come to church and the song starts singing, and maybe we were in a fight, or maybe work's being tough, or maybe you're having health battles or financial struggles or whatever the burdens of this world are, and maybe you come and you don't feel like worshiping God. But it's a decision that we're going to make consciously each and every day. God, I'm going to worship you because that's what I've been called to do. That's how love works. It's a decision. It's a decision. So, and as far as fights, to your point, when we are in the middle of a fight, and sometimes I'm the one that's upset, and I think to myself, do I like my life better when we're in good relations or over whatever this thing is I'm mad about? And always, I would rather just not be in the fight. So it's like, okay, then it's an easy decision. Drop the fight and let's be friends again, right? Because we'd rather be happy. Listen, I want to let Pastor sneak back so that you could be out there for the guests who are here. Give it up for the folks who are willing to come up on the stage. I'm gonna pray over you, and then we'll dismiss. Listen, marriage is not something that you can tackle in one quick service, and it's not something that we're going to do every week. But I do believe that if you will commit your marriage to God, and if you'll apply the principles that we learn about a good marriage in your life, you'll find that it does have impact everywhere else, because your spouse helps you be a better person, helps you be more loving, teaches you to be more selfless, and those things carry over when you're having other relationships in community with other people. So hopefully it's been a blessing for you. Let's pray, and then you guys can be dismissed. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, Lord. Lord, we exalt your name for who you are, for what you've done. Lord, for teaching us what love looks like, God, for giving us the opportunity, Lord, to reflect your love through our relationships. God, I ask that you'll put a special blessing on each and every marriage in this room, each and every relationship in this room, that the marriages will be honoring to you, glorifying your name, and Lord, that we can bring glory to your name each and every day of our lives in our relationships, and with those that we're trying to reach with the good news of who you are and what you've done. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.